Hello, my name is Curtis, and today I will show you how to use this template to build this decorative inlay. To build a decorative inlay, you're going to need a few basic woodworking tools. A plunge router equipped with a brass inlay kit is a must. The brass inlay kit has a bearing on the end that guides your plunge router around your template. It also has a bushing on the bearing that you take off when you're cutting out your inlay and you put on when you're cutting out your void. Speaking of voids, you're going to want a chisel to flatten out the bottom of the voids after your routing process. You're probably going to want some sort of hammer to hammer or place the inlay into the void. You're going to need clamps to hold everything in place on your workbench. Tape and scissors is a must. I like double-sided tape made by Shore Tape just because it has a little thickness in there, and that comes in handy when I'm prying the template off of the inlay material. A little compressed air also comes in handy, and of course we have sanding devices. The zebra wood is going to be the focal point of this inlay, so I'm going to take care and select this piece carefully. To do that, I'm going to take my template, pattern 1, and I'm going to slide it back and forth over the zebra wood until I find a grain pattern I really like. I found the focal point for my inlay, so using the template I am now going to trace that pattern onto the inlay material. As I trace it, I'm also going to include my alignment marks. I'm going to use pattern 2 to figure out where I want to place my focal point. Once again, I will just move it around the base material till I find a grain direction I like. Once I find that grain direction, I will trace the pattern onto the wood. Using my alignment marks, I'm going to transfer pattern 1 to the base material. When I'm putting tape on my base material, I want to make sure that I put it in areas that will adhere to the template, and I also want to make sure I use enough tape so the template does not move during the routing process. It is better to use too much tape than not enough tape. With the tape exposed, align pattern 1 and firmly press the template into place. After you've pressed your template into place, wiggle it. If it moves, you need to take it off and retape it because you did not use enough tape. Remember, the template cannot move while you're routing. Using clamps, I'm going to affix this template to the workbench so it does not move during the routing process. When I'm placing my clamps, I want to make sure that they do not interfere with the base of the router. So sometimes I like to put my router up there before I place my clamps in. Okay, my clamps are in place, and neither of them will interfere with the router base. We need to adjust the depth of the cut that's going to be made by the router. Because we're putting a void in the base material, we don't want to go all the way through that material, nor do we want that cut to be so deep that the inlay itself sinks into the base material. You want your inlay to slightly protrude above the base material when you assemble it. To cut the void in the base material, take your plunge router without the bit extended and the bushing on and place it inside pattern 1. When you put it in there, make sure the bushing stays in contact with the side wall of the shape. Turn the router on and plunge it into the material. With it running, go around the exterior of the shape one time. After that, go back and forth to remove as much material as possible. The first pass has been made, now you need to remove the debris from inside the void. When cutting your second pass, make sure the bearing stays in constant contact with the template wall. That will ensure that your inlay has a nice tight fit into the base material. Now that the void is cut, you need to remove your clamps and the template from the base material. The paint scraper is useful for removing the template from the material. Slide it between the two, and then when you get to the areas where there's tape, wiggle it around and kind of pry up. The template is somewhat pliable, but if you bend it too much, it will break, so do use caution. If there are any rough spots in your void, you can remove them by using a chisel. Be careful though on the edges of the void. You don't want to dent them with a chisel. We are now ready to cut the inlay from the zebra wood. Prior to applying the tape, clear your materials of all dust and debris. Just like with the base material, we're going to align pattern 1 over the area that we want to cut out, and then we're going to firmly press the template into place. Then we are going to clamp the entire assembly to our workbench. Remember, nothing but the router moves during the cutting process. In this step, we're cutting an inlay. Because of that, we take the bushing off of the router and we set the depth to cut all the way through the inlay material. We want to go all the way through this material, but not too deep into the backing material. The further you go into the backing material, the harder it is to move your router. I have adjusted my router so it now cuts to the proper depth, and I have removed the bushing from the inlay kit. I am now going to position my router inside pattern 1, making sure that this bearing stays in constant contact with the template wall. I'm going to turn the plunge router on and plunge it fully into the material. Then I'm going to guide the router around the shape, paying attention to any changes of direction. Make sure that you firmly keep your router against the template wall, but you don't want to pull too hard. Firm, constant pressure will give you the best results. Now that the inlay is cut, I'm going to remove the clamps and the template from the inlay material. To remove the inlay piece itself, use your paint scraper and slide it between the backing material and the inlay material. Use care and caution because the inlay piece is now fairly small and it will be slightly fragile. Pre-fit the inlay into the void in the base material. It may fit fine, you may have to do some sanding. If you do sanding on the inlay, I recommend putting a slight bevel onto the bottom edge of the inlay piece itself. That will help you position the inlay inside the void, and it will show you exactly where you need to remove material to ensure a proper fit. When you're fitting your piece into the void, be careful not to push it down too far, because if you push it down in there, it's going to be hard to remove in order to glue into place. Now that my inlay has been properly fitted, I'm going to apply a little glue to the back side of the inlay and a little to the inside of the void. With glue applied, I am now going to stick the inlay into the void and press the two together. Personally, I like to use a soft mallet to gently tap the inlay into place. After tapping the inlay into place, I like to use a clamp to make sure the two pieces are squeezed together properly. Now that I've assembled my inlay, you'll notice that the inlay extends above the base material a little bit. I need to sand it so it is flush with the base material. While I'm sanding, I want to be careful and leave my registration marks in place if I can. You'll notice now that my inlay has been sanded down to the same height of the base material. You'll also notice that my alignment marks have been erased, so I want to redraw those alignment marks so I can use them as a guide to position this template when I tape it into place. I've applied the tape to the inlay material that will hold the template in place. You'll notice, however, that there is no tape inside this area here that's going to be cut out. I do that because if there's tape in here, it tends to collect router debris, which grabs at the bit during the routing process. You don't really want any extra grabbing of the bit while you're cutting an inlay. So just keep the tape out of that area and you won't have that problem. I'm about to apply my template to the inlay material, and I will use these alignment marks as a reference. Now that the template has been properly positioned, make sure you firmly press it into place to make sure it does not move during the routing process. I am now affixing the assembly to the workbench so it does not move during the routing process. Pay attention to clamp placement. While routing this inlay, if the router base or handle hits this clamp, you're going to ruin your inlay. So make sure your clamps are out of the way. And I also recommend taking a practice run all the way around the shape. I do this for two reasons. One is to make sure that I have enough distance between my clamps, and the other is to get used to the shape that I'm going to be routing so there are no surprises, especially on corners. Because when you get to corners, you want to roll around them, practice it before you're doing the cutting. I have set the depth of the router so it will cut all the way through the inlay material. I have taken the bushing off the inlay kit as well. Now I'm going to cut out this inlay using the exact same procedure I used when I cut out the zebra inlay. I'm going to place the router inside the shape. I'm going to make sure the bushing is against a template wall. Turn on the plunge router, plunge it into the material, and work all the way around the shape, keeping the bearing in constant contact with the wall. Now that the inlay is cut, I'm going to remove the clamps and the template. Don't forget to use your putty knife while you're getting the template off the inlay material. Because we used double-sided tape when we prepared our inlay material, we need to use our putty knife again to get the inlay itself out. I now need to cut a void into my base material for this inlay to go into. I have to use pattern 2 for the void because I use pattern 2 to cut the inlay. I use the exact same technique to put my alignment marks and pattern cutouts on the bloodwood that I used when I was putting my zebra wood into the maple. I have affixed my template to the inlay material and firmly pressed it into place. You'll notice that the end of the template, though, isn't really supported. So rather than just leaving it there like that, I like to put something underneath it to give it some support. Remember, when you're routing an inlay, nothing but the router moves, and this is movement. I have affixed my assembly to the workbench, and you'll notice there's plenty of room between the clamp and the cutout pattern. I'm going to be cutting a void for this inlay to go into, so I need to put my bushing on, and I have to adjust the depth of my router. The depth of the cut has to be shallower than this piece here, and definitely shallower than your base material. You don't ever want to cut all the way through your base material. I've adjusted the router so it will now cut to the proper depth. I have put the bushing on the router inlay kit. I will now use the exact same procedure I used when cutting the void in the maple to cut the void into the bloodwood. Alright, just like cutting out the void in the maple, I have completed my first pass and removed the debris. I am now ready to take my second pass around here to make sure I have a sharp edge and remove all these little things that I missed with the first cut. Okay, we're getting a little repetitious now. We've made the cut, we've removed the clamp, we've removed the template. Just like when we assembled the zebra wood into the maple, we're going to pre-fit the inlay into the void and sand the inlay where needed to fit. My inlay has been fitted to the void. I'm now going to apply a little glue on both the inlay and into the void and press the two together. I've inserted my inlay into the void and pressed the two materials together. Now I have to sand the inlay to be at the same height of my base material. And just like last time, I'm going to want to be able to recreate my alignment marks, so take whatever steps are necessary so you can recreate these marks after you're through sanding. You'll probably notice there are gaps in places between the inlay and the void wall. We can make those gaps go away by taking a little bit of glue and smearing it into the cracks. Use good downward pressure to force the glue into the crack. Then we sand over the whole thing and the sawdust mixes with the glue and it makes those lines invisible. Alright, all of my gaps have been filled now, so what I have to do next is redraw my alignment marks, position and affix my template, and then route out the inlay. The template has been aligned and affixed to the inlay material. The entire assembly has been clamped to the workbench. Because I'm cutting an inlay, I have taken the bushing off of the plunge router and set the depth so it cuts all the way through the inlay material. The inlay has been routed. Time to remove the clamps and the template from the inlay material and then take the inlay out. The inlay has been removed. Now I just need to sand and finish it. For sanding purposes, I equip my RO sander with 220 grit sandpaper. I'll sand the top, the bottom, I'll go around the edges to remove any tool marks, and then I also like to soften the edges a little bit. For finish, I'm a tung oil fan. I'll probably rub in 4 or 5 coats of tung oil. But you know what? It's your ornament. Finish it the way you see fit. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you enjoy making inlays.